Dark Cast Network. Out of the shadows comes the best of indie podcasts. The Son of Sam, or the 44 caliber killer, is an American serial killer who pled guilty to perpetrating 8 shootings in New York City between July 1976 and July 1977, which resulted in 6 fatalities. The man known as David Richard Berkowitz grew up in New York City and served in the United States Army. He killed 6 people and wounded 7 others by the 1977 July, terrorizing New Yorkers. Berkowitz eluded the biggest police manhunt in the city's history while leaving letters that mocked the police and promised further crimes, which were highly publicized by the press. Monster terrorized people for one summer, but left a legacy that carries on forever. Today we'll talk about the victims, as well as the notorious killer. My name is DJ, and this is the Mythical True Crime Podcast. Hello, and welcome to tonight's show. Tonight, we conclude the Summer of Love series with The Son of Sam. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. And if you like this episode, also consider liking and sharing the episode. I also have many other episodes before this, so you can listen to my entire library. Upcoming holiday season, starting with fall and spooky season, you'll be glad to hear that we have an event planned. Now, I can't go into too much detail, but let's just say it's going to be spooktacular. Alright, let's continue on with tonight's episode. Now, we know him as David Berkowitz. He was actually born Richard David Falco on June 1st, 1953 in Brooklyn, New York. Within a few days of his birth, his biological mother, a woman named Elizabeth Broder, gave a child away. Broder had grown up as a part of an impoverished family and was working as a waitress at the time. In 1936, she married a man named Tony Falco, an Italian-American, and after the marriage of less than 4 years, Falco left her for another woman. Berkowitz's biological father, a man named Joseph Kleinman, was a married businessman who, like Berkowitz's mother, was also Jewish. The infant Richard was adopted by Pearl and Nathan Berkowitz from the Bronx. The couple were Jewish hardware store retailers of modest means and childless in middle age. They reversed the order of the boy's first and middle names and gave him their own surname, raising him young David Richard Berkowitz as the only child. Berkowitz had a bat mitzvah and was frequently bullied by being Jewish. Journalist John Sanders wrote that Berkowitz's childhood was somewhat troubled. Although of an above-average intelligence, he lost interest in his education at an early age and became infatuated with petty larceny and starting fires. He suffered head injuries also as a child, which possibly contributed to that behavior. Neighbors and relatives also recalled Berkowitz being difficult, spoiled, and a bully. His adoptive parents consulted at least one psychotherapist due to his misconduct, but his misbehavior never resulted in any legal intervention or any serious mention in any of his school records. He attended public school, number 123 and number 77. Berkowitz's adoptive mother died of breast cancer, unfortunately, when he was just 14 years old, and his home life became strained years later, particularly because he disliked his adoptive father's second wife. Berkowitz lived with his father while attending Christopher Columbus High School and a college in a 4.5-room apartment down on 170 Drescher Loop in the Co-op City from 1967 to about 1971. In 71, at the age of 17, Berkowitz joined the United States military in the Army Division and served at Fort Knox in the U.S. and was also an infantry division in South Korea. He was honorably discharged in 1974 of June when he located his mother, Betty. After a few visits, she disclosed the details of his birth. News greatly disturbed Berkowitz, and he was particularly distraught by the array of his reluctant father figures. Forensic anthropologist Elliot Layton described Berkowitz's discovery of his birth details as, quote, a primary crisis of his life, and a revelation that shattered his sense of identity. His communication with his mother lapsed later, and from that time he remained in communication with his adoptive sister, Rosalind. Berkowitz attended the Bronx Community College also for 1 year, enrolling in the spring of 1975. However, by 1976, he left and went to work as a driver for the Co-op City Taxi Company. He subsequently left that and had several non-professional jobs, and at the time of his arrest, he was working as a letter sorter for the United States Postal Service. It's unclear when it began, but during the mid-70s, Berkowitz began committing violent crimes. He bungled his first attempt at murder using a knife, then switched to a handgun, and began his lengthy crime spree throughout the New York boroughs of the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Queens, seeking particularly young female victims. All but one of the crime scenes involved 2 victims. He infamously committed some of his acts while a woman sat with his boyfriend in parked cars. Berkowitz exhibited an enduring enjoyment for his activities, often returning to the scenes of the crime. Now, Berkowitz claimed that he was about 22 years old when he committed his first attack on Christmas Eve, 1975. But when at that time he used a hunting knife to stab 2 women in the Co-op City. The first alleged victim was a Hispanic woman who was never identified by police, but the second one was a 15-year-old Michelle Foreman, a sophomore at Truman High School, who he stabbed 6 times on a bridge near the Dresser Loop, and whose injuries were serious enough to where she had to be hospitalized for a week. Berkowitz was not suspected of these crimes at the time. However, soon afterward, he did relocate to an apartment in Yonkers. Now, the first shooting attributed to Berkowitz actually occurred in the Pelham Bay neighborhood of the Bronx. It was about 1:10 a.m., July 29, 1976, when a woman named Donna Loria, who was 18, was an emergency medical technician, and her friend, Jody Valenti, also a 19-year-old nurse, were sitting in Valenti's car. They were double parked in an Oldsmobile discussing their evening at the Peachtree New Rochelle nightclub. Donna opened the car door to leave and noticed a man quickly approaching her. Startled and angered by the man's sudden appearance, she said, "Now what is this?" The man produced a gun from a paper bag he had carried with him and crouched. Bracing one elbow on his knee, he aimed his weapon and fired. Donna was struck by one bullet that killed her instantly. Jody was shot in her thigh, and a third bullet missed both women. The shooter then turned and walked away very quickly. Jody survived the injury and said that she did not recognize her killer, however, to when she was questioned by police. The only description she gave was that he was a white male in his 30s with a fair complexion, around 5 foot 8 inches, weighing about 200 pounds. His hair was short, dark, and curly in a mod style. This description was repeated by Loria's father, who claimed to have seen a similar man sitting in a yellow compact car nearby. Neighbors gave corroborating reports to police that it was an unfamiliar yellow compact car that had just been cruising the area for hours before the shooting. Years later, in 1993, an imprisoned Berkowitz admitted in an interview to journalist Maura Terry that he had shot Loria and Valenti. On October 23, 1976, a similar shooting occurred in a secluded residential area of Flushing, Queens, next to Bowen Park. Carl De Niro, a Citibank security guard, and Rosemary Kinnan, a Queens college student, were sitting in Kinnan's car when the windows suddenly shattered. De Niro quoted saying, "I felt as if the car exploded." Kinnan quickly started the car and sped away for help, and the panicked couple did not realize that someone had been shooting at them from a distance, even though De Niro was bleeding from a bullet wound to his head. Kinnan had only superficial wounds, such as scrapes and cuts from the broken glass, but De Niro eventually needed a metal plate to replace the portion of his skull. Neither victim even saw their attacker. At that time, police determined that the bullets embedded in Kinnon's car were that of a .44 caliber weapon, but they were so deformed that they thought it was unlikely, as they couldn't be linked to a particular weapon. Because De Niro had shoulder-length hair, police later speculated that the shooter had mistaken him for a woman. Now, it just so happens that Kinnon's father was a 20-year veteran police detective for the NYPD, the New York Police Department, causing an intense investigation. As for the Laura Valentini shooting, however, there seemed to be not any tangible motive for the shooting. Police made little progress with the case. Many details of the De Niro Kinnon shooting were very similar to that of Laura and Valentini case, but police actually initially didn't associate them together, partly because, like many shootings, the shootings occurred at different boroughs, and they were investigated by different police precincts. Later in November 27, 1976, high school students Donna DeMasi and Joanne Lamino were walking home from a movie shortly after midnight. They were chatting on the porch of Lamino's home in Floral Park when a man dressed in military fatigues approached them and began to ask directions. In a high-pitched voice, he said, "Can you tell me how to get?" and quickly produced a revolver. He shot each of the victims once, and as they fell to the ground injured, he fired several more times, striking the house before running away. A neighbor heard the gunshots, rushed out of his house, and saw a blond man running past, gripping a pistol in his left hand. DeMasi had been shot in the neck, but the wound was not life-threatening. Lamino was hit in the back and hospitalized in serious condition. And unfortunately, she was ultimately rendered a paraplegic. Shooting again did not occur until January 30th, 1977, at about 10:40 a.m., when Secretary Christine Freuden and her fiancé, a bartender by the name of John Dell, were sitting in Dell's car near the Forest Hills Lyre Station in Queens. They were preparing to drive to a dance hall after seeing the movie Rocky. 3 gunshots penetrated the car, and in a panic, Dell drove away for help. However, he sustained minor superficial injuries when Freuden was shot twice and died several hours later at the hospital. Neither victim again seen their attacker. Police at this time made the first public acknowledgement that the Freuden-Dell shooting was similar to that of early incidences, and that the crimes might have been connected with others. All the victims had been struck with a .44 caliber bullet, and the shootings seemed to target particularly young women with long dark hair. NYPD Sergeant Richard Conlon stated that the police were, quote, leaning towards a connection to all these cases. Composite sketches were released of that of a black-haired Lorena and Valentini suspect and the blonde Lamino DeMasi suspect, and Conlon noted that the police were looking for particularly multiple suspects, not just one. At about 7:30 p.m. on March 8, 1977, Columbia University student Virginia Voskerson was walking home from school when she was confronted by an armed man. She lived about a block from where Freuden actually was shot, and in a desperate move to defend her life, Virginia lifted her textbooks between her and her killer. However, the makeshift shield was penetrated, and the bullet struck her in the head, ultimately killing her. Later that month, on March 10th, a police press conference, the NYPD officials and Mayor Abram Beam declared that the same .44 caliber Bulldog revolver had fired shots that killed Lorena and Virginia. Official documents were later brought to public eye, revealing that while police strongly suspected that the same .44 Bulldog was used in the shootings, the evidence was actually inconclusive. The crimes were discussed by the local media virtually every day. Circulation increased dramatically from the New York Post and the Daily News, tabloid newspapers with very graphic crime reporting and commentary. Even foreign media featured many of the reports as well, including a front-page article of newspapers in the Vatican's newspaper and Hebrew newspapers, as well as the Soviets. Now, at about 3 a.m. on April 17, 1977, a man named Alexander Esso, a tow truck operator, and Valentina Serrani, a layman college student, she was also an aspiring actress and model, were both sitting in a car belonging to Esso's brother in the Hutchinson River Parkway service road in the Bronx. Lover's Lane, as it will. About a block from Serrani's home, and only a few blocks away again from the Lorea Valentini shooting. A resident in the nearby building heard 4 shots particularly and called for police. Soriano, who was sitting in the driver's seat, was shot once, and Esso shot twice, both in the head. Serrani died at the scene, and Esso died at the hospital several hours later without being able to describe his attacker. Police said that the weapon used in the crime, again, was that of the same from whom they'd been suspected in earlier shootings. In 1993, Berkowitz confirmed that he was the shooter. Now, about this time, crime letters started coming in. Police discovered a handwritten letter near the bodies of Esso and Serrani, written mostly in block capitals and a few lowercase letters, and particularly it was addressed to the NYPD captain, Joseph Borelli. On the letter, Berkowitz identified himself as Son of Sam for the first time, naming himself. The press had dubbed the killer the .44 caliber killer because of his weapon of choice, but the letter initially held from the public, and some of the contents were revealed to the press, particularly the name Son of Sam, and that quickly replaced the old name. The letter expressed the killer's determination to work and to continue his work, and taunted police for their fruitless efforts to capture him. In full, with misspellings intact, the letter read, "I am deeply hurt by your calling me a woman hater. I am not, but I am a monster. I'm the son of Sam. I'm a little brat. When Father Sam gets drunk, he gets mean. He beats his family. Sometimes he ties me up in the back of the house. Other times he locks me in the garage. Sam loves to drink blood. Go out and kill, commands Father Sam. Behind our house, some rest. Mostly young, raped and slaughtered, their blood drained. Just bones now. Papa Sam keeps me locked in the attic, too. I can't get out, but I look out the attic window and watch the world go by. I feel like an outsider. I am on a different wavelength than everybody else, programmed to kill. However, to stop me, you must kill me. Attention all police. Shoot me first. Shoot to kill, or else. Keep out of my way, or you will die. Papa Sam is old now. He needs some blood to preserve his youth. He has had too many heart attacks. Too many heart attacks. Ugh, me hoot. It hurts, sonny boy. I miss my pretty princess most of all. She's resting in Our Lady's house, but soon I'll see her. I am a monster. Beelzebub, the chubby behemoth. I love the hunt. Prowling the streets, looking for fair game, tasty meat. The women of Queens are the prettiest of all. I must be the water they drink. I live for the hunt. My life. Blood for Papa. Mr. Borelli, sir, I don't want to kill any more. No, sir. No more, but I must. Honor thy father. I want to make a love to the world. I love people. I don't belong on earth. Return me to Yahoos. To the people of Queens, I love you. And I want to wish you all a happy Easter. May God bless you in this life and the next. And for now I say goodbye and good night. Police, let me haunt you with these words. I'll be back. I'll be back. To be interrupted as bang, 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 ugh. Yours in murder, Mr. Monster. After this quick message, we'll be right back. Hello there, listeners. Whether you're new or you've been with me from the start, a great way to catch up and dive deeper into the world of mythical true crime is to check out my earlier shows. I've covered everything from Bigfoot to aliens and ghosts. Take a moment and browse through the past episodes, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Your support means everything to me. Now, at this time, the police speculated that the letter writer was familiar with Scottish English. The phrase, "Me hoot, it hurts, sonny boy," was taken from a Scottish accented version of "My heart, it hurts, sonny boy." The police also hypothesized that the shooter blamed the dark-haired nurse for his father's death due to "too many heart attacks" phrase, and the facts that Loria was a medical technician and Valenti was studying to be a nurse. The killer's unusual attitude towards the police and the media received widespread scrutiny. Psychologists observed that many serial killers gain gratification by eluding their pursuers and observers. The feeling of control over media, law enforcement, and even entire populations provides a source of social power for them. After consulting with several psychiatrists, police released a psychological profile of their suspect on May 26, 1977. He was described as a neurotic who probably had paranoid schizophrenia and also believed himself to be a victim of demonic possession. Now, the letters didn't stop, however. On May 30th, 1977, Daily News columnist Jimmy Breslin received a handwritten letter from someone who claimed to be the .44 caliber killer. The letter was postmarked early the same day in Englewood, New Jersey. On the reverse of the envelope, neatly hand-printed, were 4 precisely centered lines. They were the words, "Blood and family, darkness and death, absolute depravity, 44. The letter inside read, "Hello from the gutters of NYC, which are filled with dog manure, vomit, stale wine, urine, and blood. Hello from the sewers of NYC, which swallow up the delicacies when they are washed away by the sweeper trucks. Hello from the cracks in the sidewalks of NYC, and from the ants that dwell in the cracks, and feed in the dried blood of the dead that have settled into the cracks. JB, I'm just dropping you a line to let you know that I appreciate your interest in those recent and horrendous .44 caliber killings. I also want to tell you that I read your column daily and find it quite informative. Tell me, Jim, what will you have for July 29th? You can forget about me if you like, because I don't care for publicity. However, you must not forget Donna Loria, and cannot let the people forget her either. She was very, very sweet girl, but Sam's a thirsty lad, and he won't let me stop killing until he gets his fill of blood. Mr. Breslin, sir, don't think just because you haven't heard from me in a while that I went to sleep. No, I'd rather say I'm still here, like a spirit roaming the night, thirsty, hungry, seldom stopping at rest, anxious to please Sam. I love my work. Now the void has been filled. Perhaps we shall meet face to face someday, or perhaps I will be blown away by the cops for smoking 38s. Whatever. If I shall be fortunate enough to meet you, I will tell you all about Sam if you like, and I will introduce you to him. His name is Sam the Terrible. Not knowing what the future holds, I shall say farewell. I will see you at the next job. Or should I say, you will see my handiwork at the next job. Remember Miss Laura? Thank you. In their blood, from the gutter, Sam's creation, 44. Here are some names to help you along. Forward them to the inspector for use by NCIC, the Duke of Death, the Wicked King Wicker, the 22 Disciples of Hell, John Wheaties, rapist and suffocator of young girls. P.S. Please inform all the detectives working the slaying to remain. P.S. J.B. Please inform all detectives working this case. I wish them the best of luck. Keep 'em digging. Drive on. Think positive. Get off your butts. Knock on coffins, etc. Upon my capture, I promise to buy all the guys working the case a brand new pair of shoes if I can get up the money. Son of Sam. Now, on the particular letter underneath the Son of Sam was a logo or a sketch that combined several symbols. The writer's question, "What will you have for July 29th?" was considered an ominous threat. July 29th would be the anniversary of the Valeria Valentini shooting. Breslin notified police, who thought that the letter was probably from someone with knowledge of the shootings. The Breslin letter was sophisticated in its wording and presentation, especially when compared to the crudely written first letter, and police suspected that it might have been created in an art studio or similar professional location by someone with expertise in printing, calligraphy, or even graphic design. The unusual writing caused the police to speculate that the killer was a comic book letterer, and asked several members of DC Comics whether they recognized the lettering or not. The Wicked King Wicker reference caused police to arrange a private screening of The Wicker Man, which was a 1973 horror film. The Daily News published the letter a week later, after agreeing to police to withhold portions of text, and Breslin urged the killer to surrender. The dramatic article made that day's paper the highest-selling edition of the Daily News to date. More than 1.1 million copies were sold. Police received thousands of tips based on the references in the publicized portions of the letter, all of which, unfortunately, proved useless. As all of the shooting victims to date had long dark hair, thousands of women in New York acquired shortcuts and brightly colored dyes, and beauty supply stores had trouble meeting demand for wigs. Now, in all this chaos, on June 26, 1977, Salvatore Lupo, a mechanics helper, and Judy Placido, which was a recent high school graduate, had left the Athelas nightclub in Bayside, Queens, and they were sitting in Lupo's parked car till about 3 a.m. when 3 gunshots were heard blasting through the vehicle. Lupo was wounded in the right forearm, while Judy was shot in her right temple, shoulder, and the back of her neck. Both victims survived their injuries, however. Now, Lupo later told the police that he had discussed the Son of Sam case only moments before the shooting. Neither Lupo or Placido had ever seen their attacker, just like all previous victims. But 2 witnesses reported a tall, black-haired or dark-haired man in a leisure suit fleeing from the area. One claimed to see him leave by car and even supplied a partial license plate number. Now, with the first anniversary of the initial .44 caliber shootings approaching, police established a sizable dragnet that emphasized past hunting grounds in Queens and the Bronx. However, the next and final .44 caliber shooting occurred in Brooklyn. Early on July 31st, 1977, Secretary Stacy Makowitz and a clothing salesman Robert Valenti were sitting in a Valentine's car, which was parked under a street light near the city park of Bath Beach. They were on their first date. They were kissing when a man approached from about 3 feet from the passenger side of the window and fired 4 rounds, striking both victims in the head before he escaped into the park. Valenti lost his left eye, and Maskowitz, the only blonde victim of Berkowitz, died from injuries. That night, Detective John Falatico was awakened at home and told to report a 10th Homicide Division at the 60th Precinct Station House in Coney Island. He was given 2 weeks to work on the Makowitz and Valenti case as a normal murder investigation, but if it could be solved in that time frame, it would be given to the Son of Sam task force. Now, I do hope you enjoyed listening to part 1s of tonight's episode. Part 2 will be uploaded at the same time, and this time we'll be discussing any suspects and the eventual capture of the Son of Sam murderer. And that concludes another captivating episode, delving into the world of mythical true crime. I appreciate you joining me tonight as we listen to the facts from these true crime tales. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll uncover even more mysteries. Until then, thank you for listening to tonight's episode. Good night.